Hello, and thank you for joining us for Tiger Talk today. I'm joined today with guest Darcy Love, our Parkside principal. We're going to talk about the science of reading in a little bit. Just want to do a few announcements first today, an update on what's going on in the school district. So all summer long, we waited for snow, or not snow, we waited for precipitation, some rain or something, and now all of a sudden we hit December and it seems to be coming in big chunks all at once. So we've had an interesting couple of weeks. Last week we had a lot of snow, a lot of blowing, and certainly quite a start to winter. We initiated some e-learning day processes that we haven't used in a while, and it went really well for us as a district. It's amazing as we think back to pre-COVID, before we did all this online instruction, and what we thought we could do and what we didn't think we could do, and everything that we've learned since then, just as we reflect back and look at how those days go. Every year we do update our e-learning day plan a little bit. Remote learning has taught us a lot. I feel like these days are very productive days, where when we first talked about e-learning days a couple years back, 3 years back, we didn't really know how we would make those productive days. And I feel like now, looking at, I watch my own kids and I watch what's happening in different classrooms around the district, those are productive days virtually for our students. We certainly prefer to have them in person, but when the weather's the way it is, it's nice to have that as an option. We'll continue to take each of those different wintry days as they come, make the decision we feel is best for students, staff, and the community to keep the students safe and have learning taking place, obviously with our option as much as possible having them in person in school. I want to share that on December 2nd, we hosted our third annual CTE Summit, so a job summit. This year we hosted it at SMSU, and we partnered with the Private Industry Council, the Service Cooperative in town, and the Marshall Chamber, and we hosted the event in the SMSU Lower Ballroom. We had invited Luke Grainer. He's with the Department of Employment and Economic Development, and he's a regional analyst. He came and he talked about CTE education, how it impacts students, not just in the immediate during high school, but going forward in their lives with occupations and with salaries, and as they impacts their lives as they move into the workforce. We had a really nice presentation from him and some really good discussions with local business owners about the future of CTE education, specifically to Marshall and our community. I also want to call out a big thank you to Aaron Zemer this month. We have a board meeting, actually, as we record here, it's Monday. We have a board meeting this evening. This will be Aaron's last meeting as a board member for Marshall School Board. I just want to thank him for all the work that he's done and his ongoing commitment to our district, our students, and our staff. Aaron has been a strong supporter, a voice of support for everything that we do. I know that he'll continue to be that for our school district as we go forward. So thank you to Aaron. Then some updates from the sites. Early Childhood calls out a big thank you this month to Pride in the Tiger Foundation for generous donations. Educators for parents and children birth to pre-kindergarten are implementing continuous discipline curriculum that they were able to purchase with a grant from the Pride in the Tiger Foundation. So thank you to Pride in the Tiger for that grant and for all the other grants they contribute, all the support they give the school district. Parkside this month, Darcy called out a thank you to the girls' volleyball team from the high school. They visited a couple of our kindergarten classrooms. They visited Miss Larson and Miss Neddick's classrooms after the big state win. So an exciting visit for our kindergartners to get to have these high school kids come in and share everything they did there. So I saw some pictures, Darcy. It looked like that was a fun event for the kids.
It was. They were
like excited. Those teachers are pretty avid fans of volleyball, and I'm sure they got the kids excited about it too.
Yeah, Yep. It was a lot of fun.
That's fun. It's always fun for our kids to get to go to elementary too and see that from them. So thank you for that. At the elementary level, just for both Southview and Parkside, calling out this month too, we're doing some additional reading testing. We're doing what's called the Dibbles test. Maybe that's something we talk about at a different point.
Yep.
So that's Parkside and Southview are doing that. Our specialists, or EL and reading interventionists, are helping out with that. It helps us determine which kids are at risk and needing some additional support. We're doing some progress monitoring with that, and just making sure we're measuring the growth and that kids are where they need to be as we're moving into the second half of the school year pretty soon. So some big work taking place there. Middle school, high school level, they all want to call out this month a thank you. Also, Pride in the Tiger helped fund this. On Monday, December 5th, we had a powerful presentation from Tony Hoffman about staying disciplined. He came into all three of those, 2 sites and visiting Maytech as well. Tony shared life experience, how he went from being in prison at one point in his life to coaching Olympic BMX racers. So certainly that alone gets kids excited. He talked about starting a nonprofit for youth, and he travels around and gives this presentation. So he really connected well with our kids. In between being at the high school and the middle school, he had time to stop at Maytech, at the alternative school. He participated in an event with them, and they got to spend some time together too. So it was a powerful time for those kids to get to really connect with him. Maytech also called out they are doing a community service event where they are coming to the SMSU campus, serving food to the riders of the Dakota 38+2. Students are going to come on site and provide that meal and do that coming up here this month too. So excited about that opportunity. A lot of things taking place with activities. Winter time is a really busy time for activities in our district. A lot of things taking place there that Mitch called out, or Mr. Grunick called out this month. Congratulations to Dylan Luwaji. He's a wrestler. He won his match on Friday. It was a couple weeks ago now. He became Tigers' all-time leader for wins. So he's holding the new school record at 165, and he's got some meat still coming, so I'm sure that will continue to climb. Jonah Verstraete was recently named to the Football All-Star Game. He got to play at the U.S. Bank Stadium on December 10th, and Chitty Wakama was named to the All-State Academic Team as well. So congratulations to both of those guys. Juniors that were selected by ALT this month as Excel winners were Morgan Biala and Dylan Luwaji. Both will move on to state level, where winners are going to be announced in February. So congratulations to Morgan and Dylan for that. We also recently got AAA winners announced. They were also selected by the ALT team. So congratulations to Lauren Weary and Jackson Lent. Both are moving on to region to compete against other region 2AA selections in there. So congratulations to those guys. A lot of things to celebrate with in so many areas, but just calling out a few highlights for this month. All right, Darcy, let's talk about the science of reading. So you want to get Darcy excited about something, bring up the science of reading. Darcy gets pretty excited about this, pretty passionate about helping kids learn to read. So let's just talk a little bit. You shared a presentation recently with our admin team, and you got a presentation with the school board coming up. So we want to share with the community a little bit, too, about all this work that's taking place and maybe why they might be seeing some changes with reading instruction in Marshall Public Schools.
Sure.
So walk through a few things and some slides you want to share about this, too. So isn't it true, Darcy, that kids are just naturally learn to read if they're just read to and surrounded by great books? I've heard that.
Yeah, you would kind of think so. And I think that for a long time has been the idea that if I just read more to my children, and you may have even had teachers say that, just read to them at home, they'll pick it up. But in fact, that isn't true. This is actually a false statement. A substantial number of students, up to 40% of our students, actually really struggle significantly with learning to read. And again, that's on a scale. Some struggle a little and some struggle a lot, but through no fault of their own. There is a whole decade worth of scientific research on reading that shows that some kids learn to read very easily, but many struggle. And so for those kids that struggle, they really need instruction and taught how the written language actually works. Mm-hmm.
And this is something that you're actually taking some classes on, doing a lot of research into this, and then taking that information and learning back. And that's what we're kind of sharing today is some of that piece.
Yeah, this has always been my passion, is teaching kids to read and assuring that they have those literacy skills to be successful. And I think we've always talked about wanting all kids to be able to read, and that's one of our goals, and it always has been. I've been in education for almost 30 years, and that has always been a goal, is to make sure that all of our kids learn to read. That's what makes all other learning possible. I would say up until the last few years, while we believed that, we may not have had the knowledge and understanding to help make that happen in an actuality for all of our kids. And that's something that has happened nationwide. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too, like where the history is in that regard. But I've been taking some classes through the University of Florida Literacy Institute, and just learning a lot more about how we learn to read and what are those difficulties that children may encounter, and then what can we do to help them overcome those. Absolutely. And so one of the big takeaways from this has been that reading really isn't a natural act. Our brains are wired for language. So if you just talk to your babies, they're going to pick up language. Whatever language that may be, they will automatically pick up that skill. Reading is relatively new, and so our brains don't have a reading center or a processing center for reading. So it isn't a natural act. It isn't something that you just automatically pick up. Our brain has to be rewired to teach them how to do it. So you have to make connections between all of those different areas. There's probably about 3 different areas. So we have to be able to see the letters, connect that to a sound, make that into a word, connect it to a meaning, and put it into context. And so it is a process. And everyone can learn to read, but a good majority of our students need explicit instruction to make that happen.
Perfect. And when you talk about the reading to kids, how we're not saying that's not a good thing or it's not something, we still certainly encourage that. It's just there's more to the science of reading.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely. And I think that's probably the frustration of many parents whose children struggle a little bit to read, is they feel like they're doing everything right. And how come their child isn't picking up reading? And it's because for some it's really hard. And so this is this image that you see on the screen here now. Really, teaching reading is about connecting these different parts of the brain in order to make reading happen. And so on the far right, you see the readers with dyslexia, and you see the brain activity that takes place as they're trying to learn to read. And this is before remediation. But once you provide remediation, it looks more like a typical reader's brain, where you can see that all of those areas of the brain are working together. So it's connecting your language, it's connecting your speech, and it's connecting those visual input, the letters and the text that you're seeing.
So Darcy, a couple slides ago, we talked a little bit about, you mentioned taught how the written language works mean. What does that mean?
Yeah, and so really that's about cracking the code. That's probably the best way to say that. So you have to be able to take the written letters and then connect that to a sound. And so it really all begins with a sound. When we look at letters as readers, we don't see letters, we see sounds. And we connect all of those together. And so what you see here is, this is called the 4-part processing model. So this is just kind of breaking down what happens in our brains. So we have that input, and we are able to take those letters and connect that to phonics, to sounds. And then once we have that sound and we connect that to a word, and then we try to, our brain figures out what the meaning is. So if you saw the letters B-A-T, you would know that's bat. So then our brains will think about, like batting, a bat that flies. So there's different meanings of bat. So then you need to take the context that it's in to figure out what that meaning is. And so all of those things have to be taught in our mind to make connections in order to be successful readers.
Mm-hmm. How do we know all of this? And how has it changed since you and I were in school?
Yeah, I don't know what you remember from elementary school.
The red bird and the blue bird.
Yeah. This is they call it the Great Debate, in the 1980s or so. It was called the Reading Wars. And so the debate was how children learn to read. And so there was a group that said it's whole language, that kids just need to focus on the meaning of what they're reading, and they need to be immersed in language and in opportunities to read, and that they'll naturally pick it up. And then the other side of that was it's all phonics. You have to know the sounds in the words, and you have to study phonics. It's about decoding. And so that's really the reading wars, or the Great Debate. I remember as an elementary student, the Dick and Jane books. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's whole language. Mm-hmm. And some kids, again, will pick that up naturally, but there are a substantial number of students who won't just pick that up naturally and need to be taught. And so you can kind of see this as a timeline of where our reading has been and where it's going. But in the 1980s, like I had mentioned, is when they really had that reading war. And that's what they actually called it, because there were really 2 camps, and there were people that were very passionate on both sides. And about the year 2000, the National Reading Panel was put together by the government to kind of end the reading wars. Mm-hmm. And so the National Panel, Reading Panel, put together a study, and it said this is how kids learn how to read. The interesting thing is that rather than saying we know how kids learn how to read, they came away with what's now called balanced literacy. So they tried to balance whole language and phonics and say that, well, you need both of those. And so for a long time, that's kind of what we did, but they still didn't see the success that we should be seeing and that we should be, that kids should be reading. And so in 2018, Emily Hanford, she published an article, and it's called Hard Words, Why Kids Aren't Being Taught to Read. And this really brought, again, more attention back to the science to say, okay, the science is saying this is how kids learn how to read. Why are we disregarding that and not using that to help assure that all kids learn how to read?
Kind of how slowly some of those things move forward. We see that in so many things, but this is a good example.
Yeah. And so really, that science of reading is just a body of research, and it just informs how our practices impact reading and writing and what we need to do in order to assure that they have those skills. And part of the reason, too, is that when you look at the science of reading, it's really a study of from multiple fields. Previously, it was more just an education study, but with advances in science, there were a lot of other areas that started to look at how the brain develops and how you actually learn to read. And so each of those were kind of in their own silo and never really, they published in their own journals and they worked with their own colleagues, but there was never really that cross between them. And so with the science of reading, it's looking at all of that research cumulatively to say, now we know really how our brains develop and how we actually learn to read.
So we're not necessarily talking about something new or a big shift. We're talking about taking the best practices and really putting all the right pieces together to help support students' learning.
Yeah.
So knowing that, and based on the science and reading, how do kids learn how to read?
Yeah, that is what is so exciting because it's honestly, I'll share with you a couple of things. So firstly, can you read these words?
I cannot.
You cannot. Why can you not read them?
I'm not familiar with the sounds that those symbols make.
Exactly. You don't know what that symbol is, nor do you know what sound that symbol makes. If I put up Spanish words, you could probably read that because you speak Spanish. But if I put up another language like French, for example, that has similar sounds and symbols, you could probably read French, right?
I could figure it out.
You could probably figure it out.
I have a Spanish major, so I can figure out some of the Romance languages. Yeah.
Right. So what about this then? So this you can figure out, right?
I can figure out the words.
You could read that. You could read all of those words because your mind has orthographically mapped the sounds to the symbols. So you don't see letters there. You see words. And you read them, and you say the word. You don't say the letters.
Tramp the bangs to the dwip.
Yes,
yeah, hate it when
very
that happens.
Good. Now, if I was teaching whole language, I would say, Jeremy, you are a reader. But you would have a hard time making sense of that.
Correct.
Because you haven't, you've orthographically mapped that, but you're not able to connect the meaning. So with that, we look at it's called the simple view of reading. And so it's about assuring that you have access to the code so you know that this symbol makes this sound. It all starts with the sounds. So you have to be able to use those written symbols to put that into a word and then connect it to a meaning. And then you also have to be able to comprehend spoken language. So when you put those two things together, you actually get learning to read, comprehension when you're reading. So again, it's really a balance of those two things, and you can't have just be good at one or be good at the other. You have to be good at both of those in order to do that. And so I'll give you a quick example. So when I put this up on the screen here, I want you to say the color that you see. Do not read the word.
Okay.
Say the color.
Okay.
Okay, are you ready?
Say the color.
Say the color.
Got it.
Not the word.
Blue. Red. Orange. Green. Purple.
Okay.
That's much harder than it looks.
It is. It's because your brain has cracked the code. You can't help but read those words. If I put those words up there and I said, do not read them, Don't look at those, don't read those words. The only way you could not read them is by not looking at them. Because as soon as you see the words, your brain has orthographically mapped. It's taken the sound and symbol and connect those. So you know 2 E's together make the E sound. So you've cracked the code. You have that skill and ability. Many of our kids can't do that without systematic, explicit instruction. And that's called phonics, taking the letter and connecting it to a sound.
Right. And I think that's part of the challenge we see in the classrooms. We talk about intervention. Some kids crack that code pretty quickly, and some need a little bit more time. So it's having the supports available and processes in place to meet the needs of each individual student as they need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And our students who struggle with dyslexia or any other reading difficulties, it is most often related to that decoding skill, and helping them, again, crack that code and giving them more opportunities to practice and more of that explicit, systematic instruction.
Right. So why is this work so important, Darcy?
Oh my gosh, because it's what makes all other learning possible. Without reading, you know, we know that kids who don't learn to read by 3rd grade probably will never be really good readers. And so especially in that elementary level, we feel that urgency to assure that they have those skills. And we know that all but about 3 to 5% of our population should be able to read. Even if they're low income, if they're EL, if they're any of those things, we should be able to get all but about 3 to 5% of our students with the at least basic decoding skills to be readers. And again, the research shows without that, the long-term effects is detrimental to their success in the future. And so it's just, again, one of my passions that I feel very strongly about.
Right.
So have you ever heard of the Matthew effect?
Only because you told me about it.
I know, yeah, and it makes sense. You've probably heard things like the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, or you have to have money to make money, and that's similar to this. So the Matthew effect in reading is that if you get off to a good start and you're able to decode those words, it's what, again, makes all other learning possible. So when you encounter a new word, now you have the phonetic skills to be able to read the word. Then you just have to figure out the meaning. But our kids who do not have that, have not cracked the code and are not able to read the words, those are the students that, this is an example of them, the poor getting poorer. So if you are, I'm going to go back one here. So if you are in, nope, I was going to leave it there. There we go. So there is a study that shows that 5th graders who read at the 90th percentile, which they're good readers, they are going to encounter 2 million words every year, just in the text that they read. So that's the rich getting richer. However, on the other hand, a reader in the 10th percentile in 5th grade is only going to encounter 8,000 words. This is an example of the poor getting poorer. So you have a 5th grade reader who is getting 2 million words into their vocabulary, and you have a 10th percentile reader now who is only getting 8,000 words, and so that just increases exponentially.
This is why that intervention is so important, that we're identifying which readers are which level. I mean, we talked about the Dibbles testing earlier today. That's why we're identifying where our kids at specifically. And in a class of 25 kids, I mean, we think we're not missing, but we have to make sure we do that in very explicit look at each student's skills, and that we can identify that, and we can look at what are we doing next with it. So talk a little bit more about what we're doing in Marshall Public Schools.
Absolutely. And so when we looked at that simple view of reading, we talked about the decoding, and so that being the essential skill that we have to assure that all students master. So it's not just we taught it and we hope they learned it, but we taught it and we're going to teach it explicitly until they've mastered that skill. And that's what that Dibbles test helps us know, is if they are cracking the code. Are they getting the letter-sound relationships? Are they able to sound out words? That kind of thing. So that's what the Dibbles test helps us assess. And so with that, we also give it's called Haggerty and Really Great Reading, and both of those programs help us teach those skills. Again, the orthographic mapping, connecting sound and symbol, that type of thing. We also have a significant focus on data to assure that we're on the right track and to find out what it is they know or don't know. So if you go into the doctor and you're not feeling well, they're not going to just give everybody the same penicillin or antibiotic. They're going to first find out what's going on with you before they give you what you need. And that's exactly how it is with teaching reading. We have to know where you're at, what skills you need in order to design your instruction. And so again, just that focus on data, and then to assure that you continue to make progress wherever you're at. And then just helping our teachers also grow professionally in their knowledge and understanding of literacy and what that needs to look like and how we can, again, help kids move forward.
Right. So you mentioned on the screen, let's go back just a slide.
Yeah.
You talk about the letters training. That's a big piece that's taking place too. We've got a number of teachers participating, plus administrators participating. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I've heard the state Department of Education has talked a lot about that as well.
Yes. So the state has offered that. It's letters, and it's through Louisa Moats. It's language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. So not letters like Letters.
Right. That's why it's spelled wrong.
Yes, exactly. So it's not an error. And so it's a 2-year commitment. There are 2 books and 8 units that we'll be going through the course. This is our 2nd year doing it. But it's outstanding professional development for our teachers. And so we have 11, including myself at Parkside. There's 4, including the assistant principal at Southview, and then our director of curriculum instruction is also doing that training. And so it's fabulous.
It's really learning more about a lot of this that we've talked about today.
Yeah.
And then that literacy advisory team you mentioned on here too, that's a big part of that too. So then that team involves a lot of the people that are taking these classes, and they're really looking at that overall, what are we doing in literacy instruction? So we have consistency and alignment from one level to the next as kids move up and are still struggling. We talk a lot about read well by 3rd grade. But we don't stop at 3rd grade. We have to do more. We have to make sure we're providing, up to that point too. So that's been a big piece too. That's been relatively new. The last couple of years we've had that in place. But just talking about what does reading look like. We don't want to have one person have all this knowledge and not make sure we're spreading it. So
exactly. And while those teachers are taking the letters training, all of our teachers are really engaged in this professional development and growth, and it's a lot. It is a lot, but we're making a lot of progress, and so it's exciting to see.
It is.
All
right, I think we have one more slide. Just talk about going forward. What's the going forward plan?
I think it's just important to remember there aren't any magic bullets. This is still learning. It's still, going to take time, and we can't buy a program. We can't, there's just no magic bullet. It's just a matter of learning and really sticking with it and finding out what those kids need, and then just, again, being an advocate for literacy for all, no matter what, and just assuring that happens. And so we just try to keep that open mind, and when we learn more, we're going to do better and put things in place that will help our kiddos get to that point.
Right. So that said, let's just give me like an overview, just like explain to help the parents understand. Like if I walk into a reading classroom during a reading block, which is a big chunk of the day in Parkside, but even Southview, it's a big chunk of the day. What does it look like? Like what type of instruction is taking place? It doesn't look like it's not students in rows at a desk with a textbook.
No.
So what does it look like?
So we talked about the really great reading program, and we talked about Haggerty. So Haggerty is teaching more phonological awareness, which is just being able to differentiate sounds. So if I said to you, can you say cupcake? Say
cupcake.
Cupcake. What is cupcake without the cake? Cup. Very good. So again, just starting with those bigger sounds and then moving into smaller sounds. So then I might say cat. Stretch that with me. K, at. Now you do it. K,
at.
Cat. And so again, recognizing that words are made up of individual sounds, so breaking it down that way. And then the really great reading is more about phonics, and again, helping to connect the picture of the letter with the sound that it makes. And then they might shift into a small group where they'll do decodable readers. So they are words in a story with letters and sounds that they can decode. And so practicing that.
So a little bit of a variety of things taking place. It's not one solid block of the same thing, but it's a variety of things, some small groups and some large group instruction with certainly the standards we talk about are still part of all this too, with the interactive read alouds and all those pieces. And and we go back to where we started the presentation. You talk about if a child's sufficiently read to or motivated by being read to or reading books, that's still a big part of it. We still take them to the library and they check out books, and we still have all sorts of pieces of that going on, but making sure they have the skills to know what to do with that book when they get home too. Because like I look at my my youngest child, he'll sometimes want to bring home like a Harry Potter book. He might not be ready to read Harry Potter yet, but I want to encourage him to do that.
Absolutely, and we would say, take it home, but that would be a book you would want to read to him, you know, and help him see if he can recognize any words in the text, perhaps. And always, you know, steer them back to the letters. We don't want them to look at pictures and guess, but rather what are the sounds that you see, and so helping them decode those words.
So that's where the instruction goes back to provide that structure. So this is really good stuff, Darcy. Thank you for all your work on it. Thank you for your time and putting this together and coming to share with our community a bit today and talk about what reading instruction looks like. Because we talk a lot in education about that pendulum swing from we're doing this to we're doing this, and really the science of reading. It's kind of looking at, okay, there's a lot of good stuff going on in both, you know, wherever that pendulum's at. But let's think about what really helps move kids forward. So great. All right. Well, thank you. And we appreciate everyone joining us today for Tiger Talk. We look forward to seeing you again next month.